Good morning. A warm welcome from Cliff Decker Hofmeyer at this webinar hosted by our Agriculture Sector Group. My name is Andre de Lange. I'm a director in our Corporate and Commercial Department, and I'm also the head of the sector group. Today's webinar will focus on the cannabis regulatory landscape, and in particular will provide insight into cannabis as a viable agricultural commodity. Cannabis has been identified as an industry with enormous growth potential in South Africa and the African continent, mainly due to our favorable climate, the affordable land, as well as relatively low labor costs. However, due to the nature of the product, in order for this industry to flourish, it is of utmost importance that the regulatory regime be in place. Today, our speakers, consisting of Tony Budden, Shad Vahesh, and Liet van Schalkwyk, will unpack the latest development in respect of the regulatory landscape. I would then firstly like to introduce our speakers. Firstly, Tony Budden. Tony is a lifelong industrial cannabis hemp activist and lobbyist. He is a globally recognized expert in his field. He has recently been recognized as one of the top 100 cannabis influencers by the Cannabis Business Awards in the United States of America. Tony was the co-founder of Hemporium, one of Africa's oldest and original industrial hemp cannabis companies. This company was established in 1996, and ever since, Tony has been involved in changing laws, in help changing laws, and also the hearts and mind in respect of natural products, as well as medicines, etc. Tony is also the founder of Highland Investments and is also a director on Infogrow Malawi. Shad Vahesh is an associate in our Cape Town office. Shad has been following the regulatory developments in respect of cannabis for some time and is currently advising a number of our major clients in respect of cannabis matters. And this includes cannabis licensing, regulatory compliance, as well as due diligence work. Liet van Schalkwyk is an associate in our Sandton office. Liet was previously based in Bloemfontein, where she obtained valuable experience and expertise in the cannabis industry in Lesotho. The speakers will, the first speaker will be Shad, and he will then be followed by Tony and then Liet. What we will do is at the end of the presentation, we will open the chat line for any comments and questions that you may have. So firstly, I then now hand you over to Shad.
Hi there all. Let me just share my slides. Okay. All right. Okay, good morning and welcome to you all. Thank you for attending this webinar. I'm excited to present this topic to you, as industrial cannabis has been, and the effect that it can have on our South African economy has been a passion of mine for some time. So let's get into it. So cannabis is one of the fastest growing markets in the world, excuse the pun. Due to a fundamental paradigm shift in the stigma around and regulation of cannabis, South Africa and its burgeoning cannabis economy now represent an attractive investment opportunity for both domestic and international investors. Aside from our ideal climatic conditions, well suited to growing cannabis, we have a leading economic infrastructure, a track record of investment in agriculture, of innovation and investment in agriculture, a relatively low blue and white collar labor costs, and an increasingly transparent legal and compliance framework, creating a relatively low cost, high quality destination geared for both export and domestic cannabis activities. However, what is still required for our cannabis industry to achieve its true transformative potential is developed and integrated value chains with significant buy-in from existing domestic and international investors. Our agro-processing businesses and secondary manufacturers are essential to this value chain. This is something the state has supported in the National Cannabis Master Plan, and in terms of which we're now seeing encouraging movement, albeit at times slow. So the latest movement in the field, which will be the focus of today's webinar, is hemp. Hemp has been declared an agricultural crop under the Plant Improvement Act, which I'll call the PIA. What this has done is to provide a legal framework for import, export, cultivation, distribution, sale, and research of hemp and hemp propagating material in South Africa. By adopting a cannabis forward stance, South Africa is poised to become the continental leader in high-quality cannabis production, reaping all the economic development, job creation, inclusive development, participation, rural development, and poverty alleviation, which has been experienced in other nations as a result of the legalized cannabis cultivation and consumption. So, a take on what the minister's announcement is that the state recognizes that conservative estimates indicate 25,000 jobs could be created across value chains. Notably, both hemp and high cannabinoid containing cannabis are plants of the same genus. However, unlicensed commercialization of the high THC and high CBD cannabis remains prohibited in terms of the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act. So what is hemp? The state defines hemp as low THC or plants of the which are cannabis, cultivated for agricultural or industrial purposes, of which the leaves and flowering heads do not contain more than 0.2% THC. So that's an important limit to bear in mind throughout this presentation. THC is tetrahydrocannabinol, which is the psychoactive chemical that occurs in cannabis and which has been the primary driver behind the recreational and increasingly medical cannabis market. Hemp, on the other hand, is primarily cultivated for plant fiber for use in industrial applications, which Tony will provide a little bit more info about. Increasingly, however, hemp has been cultivated for CBD extraction internationally. Hemp plants are generally taller and suitable for open field production, while medical cannabis focuses on THC production. It's grown indoors and under controlled conditions for optimal results. Hemp is also one of the fastest growing biomasses and is used to make a variety of commercial and industrial products, including textiles, building materials, food, paper, biodegradable plastics, paint, and biofuels. Interestingly, CBD and other cannabinoids contained in cannabis are not mentioned. However, it must be noted that commercial trade in high THC and high CBD cannabis and cannabis products is highly regulated and requires a license in terms of Section 22C of the Medicines and Related Substances Act, also known as a SAPA license. Unlicensed commercial trade of high cannabinoid cannabis remains prohibited in terms of the Drugs and Drug Trafficking Act, as said. But this is not the subject of today's discussion. So, to facilitate the compliance of the PIA, the Department of Agriculture, Land Reform and Rural Development has released a guideline and permit conditions for breeding, research, cultivation, cleaning, and conditioning of seed, sale, import and export of hemp plants, seeds, seedlings, cuttings, grain, or material for industrial purposes. These guidelines and conditions are fairly detailed, and we don't have time today to go too deeply into the technicalities. I will give you a brief overview of the general requirements and focus on areas of concern. So the activities for which different hemp permit conditions are provided all represent different yet interrelated opportunities, all of which have specific regulatory conditions and require hemp permit issued in terms of the PIA. Notably, the sale of hemp seedlings, plants, or cuttings needs to take place under license. Activities further than these, as mentioned here, need. So before getting involved in the hemp industry, one should familiarize themselves with these guidelines and take specific note of the fact that a limited number of hemp varietals comply with that 0.2% THC limitation, and thus may be cultivated without a SAPRA license. This is important because South Africa's climatic conditions lend towards increased THC production in cannabis, and without a SAPRA license, this may lead to commercial non-viability of crops. What is also clear from the guidelines is that the state has placed an emphasis on traceability by mandating certain registration, record keeping, and reporting requirements. Although this entails an increased administrative burden It does facilitate transparency across the value chain, making commercial due diligence a lot more easier and effective. So some general requirements are that permits may only be held by adults. Suitable skills, qualifications, and experience is required to ensure good agricultural practices. Knowledge of the PIA and other legislation and regulations dealing with cannabis is also essential. Criminal records must be disclosed, and where serious drug offences and/or organised crimes involved, permits won't be granted. Permits are also tied to the location, as indicated thereon, and are person-specific and non-transferable. Propagating material may be planting on any premises other than on the approved premises for any reason. If the relevant premises are leased, the owner's consent must be obtained. So, as mentioned earlier, transparency and traceability are key concerns of the state, and it is therefore compulsory to present all relevant permits, authorizations, certifications, plant individuals, sales, clients, and inspections. Further, permit holders are required to submit a detailed annual report on the 30th of June every year. These reports require details of amount of seed and propagating materials, surplus seed, number of clients, which is slightly concerning, compliance with planting notification, number of inspections that have been conducted on the premises, samples and analytics, harvest output, and compliance with all aspects specified in the hemp permit and the conditions thereof. So when it comes to the sort of cultivation side and the cultivation activities, the process is tracked throughout by the state due to this mandatory notices and notification regime that they've given us. So some of these are that a notice of planting has to be given to the registrar at the nearest police station within 28 days after planting. An acknowledgement notice is then received and issued by the registrar and received by the permit holder, the SAPS, and the department inspectors allocated. Authorized inspectors must also be notified 2 weeks before harvest in the case of fiber production, and sample testing for THC must be done within 1 week before harvest for fiber production, or 15 days from the onset of flowering when hemp was cultivated for other purposes. In instance that production has failed due to, for example, environmental conditions or unauthorized removal during the growing season, the permit holder must immediately notify the registrar's office and report it to the nearest police station. Any harvested material also leaving the premises at any point in time must be accompanied by a transport declaration. Access control for authorized persons is also required on site, such that all cultivation areas must be sufficiently fenced, and notices must be placed on site informing the public that the plants being cultivated are low THC cannabis. On the issue of fencing in particular, commercial trials were conducted time ago under the guidance of the Agricultural Research Council and the Department of Agri and the Eastern Cape Department of Agri, which proved that commercial hemp production is possible and feasible in South Africa. But in the case of sort of small to medium farmers, a 2-meter high fence requirement is simply unaffordable, posing a serious barrier to new entrants to the market. Now, thankfully, the requirement for fencing has simply been reduced to an unspecified suitable fence. So a large aspect of the compliance and monitoring regime is the role of authorized inspectors and accredited facilities. The reliance on individual functionaries represents several risks, chief among them being the potential for rent-seeking behavior, but also the risk of bottlenecks due to non-availability or proximity to inspectors and accredited facilities. On the issue of sampling and analytics, sampling must be performed by an authorized inspector, and analytical tests must be done at an approved laboratory, all at the cost of the permit holder. Authorized inspectors may visit the site regularly at the cost of the permit holder, and around 100 rand. Right? So the permit holder acts on liability for any non-compliance. This also makes the permit holder individual from a transactional and risk perspective. Finally, it's always advisable to consult with legal professionals and/or qualified consultants to ensure compliance with what is clearly an administratively heavy regulatory regime. The fact that the registrar needs to be notified within specific timelines and end or revoke permits at his or her discretion also poses a significant risk in the event of non-compliance. So one aspect of the cultivation side that I want to focus on is seed and which varietals may be used, which I'm sure Tony will touch on later. It's compulsory that all seed for cultivation purposes must be certified by a designated authority and must be accompanied by the relevant proof thereof. If seed is not certified, an application must be made to the registrar to request authorization for an exemption in relation to that specific variety, and certain information as well as a motivation must be provided.
I'm sorry, Shad. I don't want to interrupt you, but if you can perhaps maybe just switch off your video, because there's a bit of a lag on the voice.
Sure thing.
Hopefully that will be better. Thank you.
Awesome. So yeah, where are we on the seed? On the seed certification part. So if seed isn't certified, application must be made to the registrar to request authorization for an exemption containing for an exemption, and we spoke about the exemption part. Okay. So if seed isn't certified, an application must be made to the South African Seed Organization, and they have certain certification procedures that follow that. And copies of seed registration certification must be kept on site at all times and accompanied by all transport, sales, export, etc. So the hemp varietals that may be sold for cultivation must be of a variety recorded on the approved varietal list. This is important as there are relatively few hemp varietals that can achieve the sub 0.2% THC threshold. As I stated earlier, that reaching the threshold may entail commercial non-viability and is therefore a risk which could be mitigated by lobbying government to up the threshold, especially given our South African climate. Other African countries, such as Malawi, have taken into account the sub-equatorial climatic conditions, which lead to increased THC levels and have set their limit at 1%. However, the European standard on THC is in industrial hemp is set at 0.3%. which would also reinforce commercial non-viability for harvests that are destined for export should the harvest reach the 0.2% threshold. However, we are seeing some change in that Czech lawmakers have recently set to increase the limitation to 1%, opening up a potential export route to Europe should the state decide to introduce a threshold more appropriate for our climate. So some key insights from the hemp framework, without going into too much detail, is that the state recognizes that hemp farming will contribute towards economic development, job creation, inclusive participation, rural development, and poverty alleviation. The state has also recognized that there's a need to lower the barriers to entry for small to medium, evidenced by relaxation of the fencing requirement. The framework put forward is administratively heavy and does entail an increased cost and complexity of compliance. The reporting framework may also serve to discourage existing, albeit illicit, cannabis farmers from participating in the licensing regime. However, the state is also trying to mitigate against criminal elements and organized crime by keeping a very close eye on what's being done throughout the value chain. Arguably, the level of reporting required may be considered slightly overzealous. So in light of our climatic conditions, the state does need to strongly consider the commercial risk posed by a 0.2% THC limit. And then finally, given the reliance on individual functionaries such as inspectors, local police, and authorized testing facilities, the potential for rent-seeking behavior does exist, and close attention needs to be paid how this authorization, monitoring, and inspection process unfolds over time. So while there are many more technical elements to the regulatory regime applicable to hemp, we are slightly pressed for time, and I encourage anyone who is interested in the hemp industry to do their research and reach out for consultation if required. In light of what we have discussed thus far, It's clear that the hemp market, while now accessible, is not without risk. And from a profitability perspective, economies of scale is a limiting factor to small and medium commercial enterprise. This, compounded with the cost of compliance and the cost of financing, still presents significant barriers to rural development. However, it does present an opportunity for prospective investors to rapidly scale agricultural initiatives and activities using strategic cash injections while also taking advantage of the relatively low cost of labor and arable land in South Africa. As identified earlier, there is a risk of bureaucracy and rent-seeking behavior, which needs to be addressed by means of an auditing framework or otherwise. Further, the legislative threshold of 0.2% THC poses a significant threat to the commercial viability of crops. Finally, it makes no sense to push for an abundance of hemp farmers without having the necessary offtake and intermediary agro-processing in place. So the risk of oversupply does prejudice the potential profitability of hemp for farmers, which would decrease price. So in order to create the most value for our economy, we need large-scale buy-in from existing agro-processing and local manufacturers, as well as an established supply and distribution channels, which take into consideration the role of rural hemp farmers across the country. So thank you all for listening to the regulatory side of the hemp industry. And I'm going to hand over now to Tony, who will speak a bit more about the.
Yes, good morning, and thank you, Shad and Andre. Right, so I'm also going to just open up my presentation. Okay, so obviously there's a lot of interest in the sector at the moment. We've been in this for a long time. Hemporium started in 1996. That's a quarter century ago now, with the expectation that the government would change the laws around hemp within the next few years, and we would be able to source our products or our raw materials locally. Unfortunately, it's taken a lot longer than that, and because of that, we've lost some opportunity, or a lot of opportunity, to become a world leader and to really focus on an export market. And it's changed the way we have to look at this locally. So let me go through some of the history and then the opportunities that do present themselves in South Africa. Firstly, the history. Cannabis is a very interesting plant. It's been a companion plant to humans for at least 12,000 years, or 14,000, maybe more. Came from East Asia originally, and it traveled around the world with humans. We took it didn't go with birds or on the sea or in the wind. We took it along with us wherever we went because of its usefulness, its ability to provide us with fiber, with food, with medicine. And because of that and its adaptable nature as a plant, that it grows in many, many conditions and adapts to its environment really well. You find it from Norway to New Zealand and everywhere in between, growing in some form or another, and generally adapted to that region where it is now growing. So let's just get to the definition of hemp to clear this up. So hemp is not a plant. Hemp is a descriptive term that refers to the non-psychoactive uses and varieties of the cannabis plant. So it's all cannabis. It's one plant, but has many different uses and different varieties. So the uses that fall under the definition of hemp include fiber products, nutrition products, your construction materials, biocomposites, cosmetic fuels, medicines, paper, and more. So a lot of this has caused confusion. A lot of people think that hemp is a separate plant. It is not. It is a use for the cannabis plant. And because of selective breeding over these 10,000 plus years, there are certain varieties that give you better fiber, where they were used in regions that used it predominantly for fiber. There are other varieties that give you much better oil content or protein content. And there are varieties, obviously, that give you higher THC and are used for either sacramental or adult use, recreational use, if that term is still used, but we prefer to refer to it as responsible adult use. And then obviously the THC as medicine. So because of these selective breeding or breeding for selected traits, we have seen a change in some of these varieties. So to say that you can't get hemp from high THC cannabis is wrong. You can get fiber, you can get seeds, but it might not be the optimum fiber. The fiber varieties that have been developed for textiles are super thin, fast-growing plant, very pliable, and has very few branches or flowers. Whereas the varieties that have been selected for THC or for the flowers often look more like a Christmas tree, many branches and more focus on the flowers. So it's quite easy also to identify what the intention is of an individual field, whether the intention is for hemp or for medical or recreational use. Also, when you're growing hemp, generally you want the seeds, so there will always be a male and female of each of the plant in the field to create obviously pollination and the production of seeds. So just some of the parts of the plant. As you can see, from the seeds you get your oils, you get solvents, you get inks, obviously foods. I'll go into the foods a little bit more later, but that's also from the protein in the seed and the omega fatty acid oils in the seed, and soaps and shampoos. The leaves, they can go back into your soil to provide nitrogen back for whatever crop you're rotating with, and also have been used as food in the past. And then you've got your fiber, which is on the outside of the stalk, that goes into your textiles, clothing, ropes, carpeting, that kind of thing, building materials. You've got your insulation that's also made with the fiber. And then you have paper as well. So instead of cutting down trees, you have something that grows in 4 to 6 months that produces a really good, strong paper. And then the inside of the stalk, what is called the hurd, it's a woody material, and that's used in making chipboard. It's used as making hempcrete, which is a mix of hemp and lime, and then also used for its absorbency because it grows so fast. It's a very spongy cellulose. It is used in things like animal bedding, even cleaning up oil spills, etc. So just a bit of history on Hemporium. We started, as I said, 1996, with the aim of showcasing everything that hemp can do, and quickly that proved to be not the best business model, but definitely we succeeded in developing clothing, body care products, food products, more recently CBD, accessories, textiles, just really trying to introduce people to everything else that the plant can do besides what they commonly assumed it was about, which was smoke. We found it a very potent way to educate people, especially the textiles, the clothing. The minute you touch and feel something that's tangible, it gives you an experience of the plant that will open your mind to there being a lot more. But quickly, hemp as nutrition, it's predominantly from the hemp seed. It's about 25% plus protein, but very digestible protein, more digestible than soy protein. Albumin and edesin are the two main proteins. And then omega fatty acids in the optimum ratio for the human body. Really good for your immune system and for moisturizing yourself from the inside. So it grows organically with ease as well. It's a very resistant crop to pests. Processing equipment, and this is a very important part now. If we are going to develop this industry locally, which we do want to, we obviously can't just grow and then suddenly someone must come and pick up, our unprocessed seeds. So we have to find small processing equipment that can be used on a farm level or on a cooperative level. And for nutrition, firstly, you're going to need a seed cleaner to separate the seeds from the leaf and flower matter, and a hemp seed oil press that will press the seeds and filter the oil, or a dehuller. And one of the most popular nutrition products at the moment are shelled seeds. You can see in the picture there, they separate the shell from the seed. That's called a hemp heart. Very delicious. You can make milk with it. Very good in smoothies. salads. It's tastes somewhere between sesame and pine nut seeds, and again, full of protein and omega fatty acids. So there we can see just some of the benefits: brain, immune function, weight loss, skin, inflammation. It really is a superfood. One of the issues we have in South Africa with malnutrition, if you look at the local diet, is there's very little omega fatty acids in the diet. They come from raw seeds, raw oil and fish, and a lot of our population do not have access to those. The only oil they eat is fried at high temperatures, which kills off the omega fatty acids. And then we see omega fatty acid deficiency and people not being able to, or kids not being able to learn properly because their brain is made up mostly of fats, and if you're not getting those good fats in your diet, your brain doesn't grow and absorb protein optimally. One of the key spaces that I've seen working over the last 25 years, I've seen this in practice where we support a soup kitchen in Khayelitsha that uses hemp seed oil in the soup. They call it the miracle oil. They've seen amazing results in people with what we'd usually expect from medical cannabis, helping slowing down seizures, taking away eczema, taking away sores and lesions from HIV, helping people with TB, that kind of thing. And it's again because without omega fatty acids in your diet, your immune system can't operate properly, and therefore adding some omega fatty acids, you see immune system fighting whatever the people are suffering from, and then being able to then at least lead a functional life. And just so you know, that building in the bottom right is a hempcrete soup kitchen that we built there as well, to show how hempcrete building can not only be, green, kind of sustainable eco homes for the wealthy, but can also fit into our RDP model. And it's much nicer. We've got data inside from the temperatures in the summer and the winter compared to the RDP houses that are built with substandard cement that are right next door. So this is now also being used at night for an orphanage for kids from the area who don't have homes, who come and sleep with Mama Mickey. Hemp seed oil and body care products, one of the best known ones, obviously the Body Shop there, full range, have been doing it for many years. It mimics the skin's oil, it goes right into the derma, protecting our skin, doesn't leave an oily residue, again, and can be done on a small craft level as well. It does not need to be highly industrialized. So benefits of hemp fiber in the textiles. There you can see the stalk on the right and how the fibers wrap the inner stalk. It's a bast fiber crop similar to flax. And because it's a hollow fiber, you've got breathability, you've got antibacterial properties. Some of our best sellers at Emporium have always been our socks. And because you've got oxygen in the actual fiber, that you don't get the bacteria growing, anaerobic bacteria that grows generally on your feet because there's no oxygen down there. It's thermoregulating, it's durable, it's got 3 times the strength of cotton, and it grows organically, so no pesticide residue in your clothing as well. So processing equipment for fiber, what you need is called a decorticator. Top right, you'll see a very basic one from China. It's basically 2 cogs. It rolls the stalks, breaking open the fiber, and the inner stalk goes one way and the fiber goes the other. And then right down in the bottom there, that's called the hemp train. Luckily, it looks like someone is going to be producing these in South Africa, which will help the industry hugely, because you need to separate the fiber from the stalk to make products. To just expect as a farmer that you're going to bale your stalks and someone's going to come and buy them, hopefully it might happen, but with the amount of people that want to do cultivation, we're going to need to process it. For the fiber textile industry, they need the fiber off the stalk. For the building and animal bedding industry, they need the herd separated from the fiber. So this is a very important part. This is, again, going to be a key part of the industry going forward, is that people don't just invest in cultivation, but invest in your manufacturing as well, the beneficiation locally. Luckily, we are quite an industrious country with many good engineers who can develop local products as well. but because we have fallen a bit behind the international scene, we can also take advantage of the development that is going on in countries like the US and Canada, and obviously China. So what can you do with the herd? This is the healthy homes. So the inside of the stalk is chipped up, as you can see there in the middle of the top left. It's a clean stalk. It's chipped up into 20mm pieces, mixed with lime, which we have plenty of in this country, and either cast in situ or made into blocks. So this hempcrete is better than zero carbon. There's obviously locking all the carbon that was absorbed while the hemp was growing. You're locking it into your wall, and then you're also replacing brick and cement, which produces a massive amount of carbon. So you have low embodied energy. These walls are breathable. It has humidity regulation because they can absorb humidity inside the house and release it then when it gets dry. So you have this regulation. It provides insulation, and it's a low toxicity environment. It's all organic, and I'm talking to you from the house in those photos at the moment. I've lived in here for 10 years, and I can quite honestly say I wouldn't want to live in anything else now. And the bottom left there as well, what we did with this house to showcase as much as can happen. Those are hemp carpets, hemp couches, hemp curtains, hemp canvas paintings, just to show how one plant can provide for so many resources that we need. And then obviously CBD, you would have heard of this, the latest buzz. It is extracted from hemp. Hemp has higher levels of CBD than it has of THC. That's another reason why when you smoke hemp, it's not psychoactive, because CBD counteracts the psychoactivity of THC. It helps produce homeostasis in the endocannabinoid system, which can reduce anxiety, promotes healthy sleeping patterns, eases nervous system conditions, can reduce pain. So all of these just will lead to us living a more balanced life. And then obviously there are the more medical aspects around helping stop seizures, obviously cancer, pain, that kind of thing, but that you're moving into then the medical framework. We promote hemp CBD as a kind of a supplement, a Schedule 0 supplement in South Africa. We prefer to see it as a food supplement. It's non-psychoactive, non-toxic, and non-addictive. And this is one of the key points we have to push back at with the government. They want to say if you want to extract CBD from hemp, you have to have a medical license, which is much more expensive and a whole lot more onerous, where in all of Europe and America, the CBD industry is a hemp-derived CBD industry, and that's what allows it to be sold over the counter. It's not a medical industry. So it really is a key lobby point we still have to get through. Equipment needed, solvent extraction generally can be done fairly basically, but the best is using ethanol. So here again is a gap for industrialists to look at setting up extraction facilities for the farmers to be able to find value in their flowers. It would be a huge disservice to South African farmers to tell them, the hemp farmers, that they're not allowed to use their flowers for CBD extraction. It's a key aspect to the value of the crop, and everywhere else in the world is allowing it. So to not allow South African farmers to access CBD would, as I said, be a disservice and put us again on the back foot. Environmental benefits of the plant: one plant, multitude of uses, does not require pesticides or herbicides, conditions the soil, it absorbs carbon, uses less water than cotton, and zero waste. You're using practically every part of the plant. Benefits to humans: we've got natural products. A lot of people, especially after the last couple of years, are focusing on their health and on building natural immunity. So providing natural materials, natural foods, natural medicines. It's very much a growing sector. Hemp fits right into that. It's biodegradable. It doesn't pollute our soils or our oceans. It's digestible. It's a superfood. Can create homes. Obviously textiles, wearing breathable textiles that again can biodegrade. Medicine, renewable energy. You can make biodiesel from the seeds, and you can make bioethanol from the stalk, and then your earth and body friendly cosmetics. So industry imperatives at the moment: we have to focus on processing and value chain development that will be needed to create an access to enable access to markets for small farmers. just baling up hemp or having dirty seeds is not enough. It needs to be cleaned. It needs to be presented to the processors in a way that they can use it, or to companies like ours in a way that we can produce either textiles or building materials from it. It's definitely a missing link. People are starting to look there, but there's real opportunity for processing and value chain development, and it is key. So it's good to hear that the agroecology and the Department of Agriculture and the DTI are looking at agro-processing, but it's key. We cannot just cultivate, and it would be a disaster if they only gave cultivation licenses without the industry that is ready to accept the raw material and turn it into something that's ready for consuming. So hemp-derived CBD is also critical for the profitability and competitiveness for South African farmers. We have to get this across the line that you can extract CBD from hemp. We need to focus on testing the product and doing all your analysis to make sure that the product is clean, that it's got no toxins, no pesticide residue, that what's on the label is in the product and what's in the product is on the label. We can do that on product. We don't have to test the plant as if it's a medicine all the way. Fences are also unnecessary and a huge barrier to entry for small-scale farmers. This is right behind me in the bottom right photo. I'm standing in front of a hemp field in Canada. Not a fence in sight. In China, I've been to hemp fields, no fences. In Europe, no fences. So why do we have to tell our small-scale farmers, or even large-scale farmers, if you want to grow 1,000 hectares of hemp and you have to put a 2-meter high fence around that whole thing, the profitability of your hemp is you're going to be paying off that fence for the next 5 years. It is unnecessary. No one steals hemp. If they do, they'll quickly figure out that it's not what they thought it was, and if you're growing enough, it's not going to leave an impact. So the only reason you might want a hemp is to keep your cows out, because they generally love to eat hemp as well. 0.2% THC level is far too low, as Shad said. Recommended is 1%, if not more. We are limiting our farmers to varieties. The 0.2%, they come from Northern Europe or high up in Europe. Cooler days, longer days, they don't perform well here. So we're limiting our farmers to varieties that don't actually grow optimally. We'd maybe like to look at growing indigenous varieties, looking at what's coming out of Ponderland that's acclimatized here, and looking at what their fiber quality and oil qualities are, and potentially moving towards that. But definitely the 0.2% THC level is way too low and has a tendency to increase with higher UV that we have in this region. And again, our focus must be on development of regional value chains and markets and enabling regulations. The moment our regulations are still coming from very much a control angle, we are not going to get the benefits of this industry and the job creation and the housing and the food if we don't create enabling regulations that allow growth of the industry, rapid growth of the industry, so we can play catch up. So at the moment, the regulations are, they're trying to get the perfect act. We need to follow what Malawi did and a few other countries in the region. Liat will speak about Lesotho now. But create a simple act that opens the industry, and then regulations can be more complex, but regulations can be changed easier and adapted as the industry grows, and we see what our climate and conditions, and then we can change regulations a lot easier than we can have to go back to Parliament and change an act. So also, I just have to put this in here, we have to stop arresting people for using this plant. Many people are still getting persecuted and still getting criminal records for something that our Constitutional Court has given us the right to use. So we have to look at the bigger picture as well of the harms of prohibition, and then opening up the wider industry around not treating this plant only as a pharmaceutical medicine. There's so many other aspects to it that can be done on a much easier and more accessible level than having to be half dead to access it as medicine. So we really are encouraged by the changes that are happening, but we also a bit frustrated by the slow rate of change, and that we are now having to play catch up. But good to see that so many people are interested, and that we believe that the industry is going to grow, but it needs to be done right now. Thank you. Now on to Liat.
Kiet, you're on mute.
Sorry. Thank you, Danny. Let me just get my slides. While we're waiting, I think a few attorneys would need some of Tony's product. It seems like it reduces anxiety as well as stress. Okay, so I'm admitted in Lesotho as well. I have been dealing with cannabis and cannabis-related matters for the last 3 to 4 years in Lesotho. So I'll just give a brief overview of the cannabis industry in Lesotho. The Kingdom of Lesotho has a very rich heritage for the cultivation of cannabis. It's not always legal, but in 2008, the Lesotho government introduced the Drugs of Abuse Act. They repealed the Dangerous Medicines Act, and the main purpose of the introduction of the Drugs of Abuse Act was to make the medicinal products more accessible. But it was also carefully crafted with exportation in mind. So it's to export the medicinal cannabis. Then the legislative framework. So like I mentioned, the Drugs of Abuse Act repealed the Dangerous Medicines Act. Cannabis and all cannabis-related products are regulated in terms of the Drugs of Abuse Act. All cannabis licenses are regulated in terms of the Drugs of Abuse regulations. The Dangerous Medicines Act regarded cannabis as a prohibited drug, but the Drugs of Abuse Act now permits the growth, extraction, and exportation of cannabis or medical cannabis. Although the legislative framework for the regulations of medical cannabis is not perfect, and really it's not, but the framework is mature and stable enough to kickstart the green surge. So we have a few challenges, obviously, in Lesotho. The first one is political instability. Obviously, it has a negative effect on economic development. It also disturbs markets, which has an adverse effect on productivity. It decreases economic growth because it affects investments negatively. South Africa must take note of the negative effect of political instability. You will lose investor confidence if you have a lot of political instability. The second thing is property ownership. Property ownership, in Lesotho, foreigners cannot own land. Land is kept in trust and it is owned by the king. So the locals of Lesotho is allocated a certain piece of land, and they are then known as the Land Act leaseholders. If foreigners want to acquire land, they have to sublease from the Land Act leaseholder. In South Africa, we have the benefit where you have a willing buyer and you have a willing seller. When an owner develops his property, it is to the benefit of the owner and it increases the value of his own property. So the third challenge that we have in Lesotho is judicial oversight. The judicial system in Lesotho is not always properly functioning, and the commercial court, for instance, did not have a judge for the past year and a half. They only recently appointed judges. So in Lesotho, we advise that you have a decent arbitration clause. Nowadays, we mostly turn to arbitration, and it functions well, especially with cannabis transactions. So let me just go on to my next slide. No, it's not working. There we go. Okay, so there's a few lessons that we can have from Lesotho. So the most important lesson that South Africa must take from Lesotho is the fact that Lesotho created an enabling environment. The purpose was to attract investors, but they also used this opportunity to promote the local labor market. In South Africa, it seems like the authorities are trying to control the cannabis sector. They want to create the perfect controlled environment. I think most of you know that a car cannot drive without an engine. We have to get the vehicle in South Africa moving. We require certain basic guidelines to regulate this industry. You can have a one-size-fits-all act. You can have a basic one-size-fits-all act. The important part is regulations, because regulations can be amended and it can grow and develop with your industry. So South African authority must realize it doesn't have to be perfect. They just have to put their pen to paper. Okay. So if anyone needs assistance, I think the CDH team will be able to assist. If you need any legal advice, we will be able to assist either in Lesotho or here in South Africa. That's all for me. Thank you.
Shad, you're on mute.
Apologies. Okay, so thank you, Tony, and thank you, Liet, for the insightful words and presentation. I think we're just going to open up the floor to anybody who has any questions. I believe you can type them in the chat box. And yeah, we have the first one, and let's see how we can deal with them. Just a disclaimer, though, this is a grey area of the law. We are still in a developing regulatory environment. And that means we can't answer questions in too much of a specific detail, but we'll try to do them as best we can. Okay, I've got a. Sorry, Karushka, I don't know if you can display the questions.
It seems Tucker has his hand raised for a question. Tucker, I've enabled your mic.
So how will we be able to ensure testing is done across all labs? So testing for me is a particular area of concern, especially given that only accredited laboratories are allowed to conduct the testing. That is something that the state needs to address. They are providing an accreditation framework, although we need to get a little bit more insight into that and see how it unfolds over time. Yeah, so that is an area of concern, especially when you think about the sort of harder to reach or rural farmers and the increased cost that it may entail when it comes to sending your product constantly for testing. Okay, we've got another question from Tama. Could you please type it into the chat box? Alternatively, we can unmute your mic.
Tom, are you able to unmute and ask your question?
Good morning. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you clearly.
Oh, yes. Morning. My name is Tama. I just have one question here with me. I just want to find out, do we have organizations in South Africa that are willing to fund maybe one who is willing to venture into cultivation of cannabis or cannabis? Because I know we've got IDC that does most of funding of businesses, especially when it comes to food production and manufacturing. So is IDC available to fund one, maybe procuring materials or seeds or land? Thank you.
Thank you, Tama. So I definitely cannot speak on behalf of the IDC. But what I am seeing is increased investor interest. I believe there's recently been a private equity fund that's been opened up to fund cannabis, small to medium scale cannabis suppliers. And it is, and like the very fact that you don't know about these sort of funds is evidence that more needs to be done to indicate, that there is funding available. And that this is an opportunity for investors to make available. So when it comes to financing, that is also one of the concerns, is that there are high financing costs, especially for small to medium scale farmers. But what is essential towards establishing a secondary manufacturing and intermediate, or the agro-processing industry or value chain, is that we have a supply. We have guys who are able to go out and farm and turn their arable land into a sustainable hemp supply. So it is absolutely essential, and I'm looking forward to seeing how the finance industry reacts to this very recent change in legislation.
Can I add to that, please?
Sure, of course.
So one of the key things that investors are looking for at the moment, and it's not that easy, but it is will help your chances of getting investment a lot more, is if you have offtake agreements. So if you have someone who's prepared to either process with you or to buy what you're going to grow, that's what investors are looking for at the moment. Just cultivation and then going, okay, what next once you harvest is not enough anymore. We, as South Africa, we missed that boat. If we had got going in the 90s, as when research started in South Africa, that would have been the case, because they weren't growing in Canada or in Europe. Now Canada is full of cannabis. Europe is also getting provided to by East Europe. They're growing in UK. So our export opportunities are not what they were. So we have to look at, as I said, the processing locally and finding that offtake, making sure that what you grow, you can sell. That is what's attractive to investors at this time. Not just saying, hey, I've got really nice land and really nice water, I'm going to grow 100 hectares of hemp or of cannabis, who wants to invest in me? That's not enough for the investors now to be secure that they're actually going to get their money back. We have to look at securing offtakes, making sure that there is a market for what you're going to grow before you plant. I know, and it's an uncomfortable position I'm in sometimes because of my experience and seeing what happened in Canada, where everyone focused on cultivation only. They've got 1 billion grams in storage on the recreational and medical side at the moment. 1 billion grams that they can't sell because everyone just focused on cultivation. We have to focus on developing a sustainable market too. Otherwise, farmers are going to be in a situation where they've done a great job cultivating, they've done a great job harvesting, but then if there's no one who's going to come and buy from you at the end of your season, it's going to be a disaster, especially for the smaller farmers. So our focus needs to, as I said, just market development and making sure that there's offtake. And that's, again, as I said, if you can do that, if you can find the market, your investors will happily invest in you.
Right, we've got a couple of hands raised here. I think the next one was what we've got here. What is hemp's water use, water supply, and how does polluted water affect it? Well, as far as I know, hemp is a water-intensive crop. But we in South Africa have been very blessed with a very good water supply, very good quality water. But I think Tony can definitely speak a lot more to that.
Yeah, it uses much less than cotton if we're using it as a fiber crop. But that's one concern for here in the Western Cape. We are the only province that has winter rainfall, and so hemp is grown in the summer, so you have to irrigate. It obviously pushes your costs up hugely in the Western Cape, is paying for the electricity to pump water to your fields. Whereas the rest of the country, especially the Eastern Cape, Eastern Free State, those areas where there's a lot of water that rain in the summer time when the plant is growing, you won't need to irrigate nearly as much. So it can be grown, if on irrigated fields, definitely, but even dry land in certain areas. But Western Cape would more be suitable for more kind of boutique, whether it's for CBD or what I'd really like to see on the initial model for hemp seed oil is something that mimics the olive oil industry, where you have different regions growing different varieties and producing oil on farm. It comes off the farm, say Tilbach Valley organic hemp seed oil, bottled, ready for market off the farm. That kind of thing can work on a smaller scale. and with less irrigation. So it obviously, the plant is super robust and tough. It will grow with minimal water, but it will not give you the yields you're looking for. So as with most plants, the more you water it, the better yields you're going to get. And that's just agriculture 101. We have to give it some water to grow.
We've got a solidarity. Have you done any research on phytoremediation in South Africa? I personally can't speak to whether the state has done phytoremediation research, but I'm not too sure. Tony, if you
Yeah, there's a master's student at the moment at Stellenbosch, Lance van Rooyen. He's doing his master's on using the effluent from the wine industry to water hemp. And there was also a project going on in the mines looking at hemp to help sort out some of the water from the mines. I haven't seen results from that yet. It definitely is a phytoremediation crop. There's a couple of studies been done on contaminated soil in Italy. For things like sewage and that, it's not ideal because it doesn't grow all year round. So if you're wanting to set it up on a perpetual situation where it's growing all year round, you'd rather choose something like reeds, that kind of thing, that are growing in the winter, whereas hemp will only be doing the job in the summer. But as far as cleaning up contaminated soil on farm to take some heavy metals and that out of soils, it's really good at that. But yes, more research needs to happen.
And then there was also a question about pest control. And I know that hemp is naturally pest resistant, but of course there's always a level of pest control that's required. If you want to speak about that a bit.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we've done 4 years of trials in the Western Cape, and then obviously we've been growing in Lesotho, and minimal pest control is needed. You do get some insect activity, but they don't do too much damage to the seed. Birds love the seeds, but again, you would, if you're growing enough hemp, you would need like a major impact from birds to see any major decrease in yields from your crop. So a couple of birds eating some seeds around the outside, it's okay. But there aren't any pesticides that are approved for hemp locally yet, and there are some coming in the States. It is still obviously regional. You'll find pests popping up. We haven't done tests everywhere in the country, so you will see different pests popping up. So it's still something that we need to get more research and support from the Department of Agriculture on.
Right. I see a couple of hands raised, but I can't see any of the questions. So I'm going to start again with we've got a Jean here. Jean, I'm going to unmute you. I don't know if you can unmute yourself, but yeah. Okay, it seems like it's not coming through. Then we've got a Ted Keenan. Ted, I don't know if you'd like to ask a question. Okay, it seems like none of the questions are coming through. So
I can see a question from Turka that I can respond to. Turka, is a relation of the hops family. So that question is there a couple of issues in South Africa with hops, latent viroid affecting hemp crops? We haven't seen it yet, but I would suspect it's something to keep an eye out for because hemp is a member of the hops family.
So Vian, I see your question is, in terms of traceability of supply chains, what are the current challenges and are there service providers for digital solutions to support this? So that is a very good question. I'm glad you raised it. Traceability is one of the key focuses of the government, and especially given the role of organized crime and serious drug offences in the past. And what you propose is, in fact, an opportunity, and I hope more people start to think this way. You know, technology and agri-tech is a growing field of interest. It is open to a lot of investment, and I would love to see the hemp industry play as well, combined with the tech industry in South Africa, start to address these challenges. I mean, as the presentation showed, there are a lot of reportability and record keeping requirements, and if tech can augment these and allow individuals to make their task easier for individuals, you know, all the better for everybody involved. So potential business and investment opportunity there.
There are some available in the medical space. Obviously, they're quite costly for hemp, and they're more focused on, you know, like each plant in the medical space is worth a lot, where, you know, that's one of the key differences between the hemp industry and the medical or the recreational industry, is the difference between agriculture and horticulture. When you're growing for medicine, it's horticulture, you're looking after flowers, and each individual plant is worth a lot, where hemp is agriculture, you're looking after fields, and, you know, it's looking at ecosystems on hectares and hectares versus each individual plant. So it makes more sense on the medical side to go for you know, quite costly traceability, but obviously the most feasible for hemp is GAP, you know, good agricultural practices, to get good agricultural practice certification, and there are elements of traceability in there, but there are a few companies already working on apps that will make that a lot easier for the smaller scale farmers as well. So we will see that coming in. But as I said, already out of the States, you have to import the software and some of the barcoding hardware that is available, but we'd hopefully see South Africans develop some local solutions.
All right. Okay, we've got one from Zenda here. The Sandton Cannabis. Do we perhaps know about the Sandton Cannabis Expo? I can't speak on their behalf, unfortunately. Right. I think perhaps I think
it's next weekend. There's a Cannabis Expo in Sandton, if I'm not mistaken. That's next weekend, and then early next year in Cape Town. So I think that's just Cannabis Expo South Africa. And sorry, one last, I think You Can Grow. You, the letter, can grow, was the digital solution that's being developed. Wihan, if you want to have a look there, by a guy called Steve Carver.
All right, I think that's sort of the end of the questions, and that's perhaps a good time to call it. Thank you to both presenters, especially you, Tony. We appreciate your insight here, and I hope it's been of benefit to everybody. I'll swap over to Andre.
Yes, thank you. Thank you to all the presenters. It was very informative. I really appreciate your time, especially Tony. As an outside presenter, thank you very much. And I really hope to all of you, all the audience, I hope you found it informative and of value to your business, and we really appreciate your time. I would also just like to remind you of our next webinar that CDH will present, and that is on the 18th of November, and it will deal with shareholder appraisal rights in terms of Section 164 of the Companies Act. So just remember that, and then all the best and have a good day. Thank you very much.
Thank you all.